The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. The judge's voice echoed off the walls as he read the sentence. For the charges brought before this court, the defendant, Daniel Reeves, is hereby sentenced to 150 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. Gasps filled the room. Daniel's mother screamed. His lawyer froze mid-breath. Even the prosecutor blinked in disbelief. It was the kind of sentence usually reserved for serial killers or terrorists. But Daniel Reeves hadn't hurt anyone. He hadn't even held a gun. He'd never been violent in his life. Daniel's knees nearly gave out as he heard the number again. 150 years. His entire body trembled. He was 32 years old. That meant he'd die in prison alone behind bars for a crime that hadn't spilled a single drop of blood. The guards took him by the arms. His wrists were already cuffed, his suit wrinkled and stained with tears. The courtroom blurred as they led him away, his mother's sobs fading behind him. Cameras flashed. The headline was already forming for the evening news. Nonviolent hacker gets century-long sentence in landmark federal case. Daniel looked up one last time as the heavy doors closed behind him, the words echoing in his mind like a curse. How did it come to this? And that's where our story begins. 3 years earlier, Daniel Reeves wasn't anyone special. He lived in a small apartment in Austin, Texas, with more computer parts than furniture. He wasn't dangerous, just brilliant, curious, and a little too reckless. He worked as a freelance coder, taking small contracts from tech startups and cybersecurity firms. His best friend, Megan Cole, often warned him about his gray area projects. Daniel would just smile and say, "It's all just code, Meg. Zeros and ones can't hurt anyone." But Daniel's curiosity was bigger than his caution. One night, while poking around in a government server out of boredom, something he'd done dozens of times just to test his skills, he stumbled onto something strange. A folder labeled Cedar Project. He shouldn't have opened it. Every warning light in his head flashed red. But curiosity pushed him forward. Inside the folder were hundreds of files, government contracts, emails, and payment records linking a major corporation, Branton Dynamics, to illegal surveillance software being tested on American citizens. Daniel's heart raced. This wasn't some random bug in a system, this was a crime. A huge one. He didn't know it yet, but that one click had just changed his life forever. Over the next few days, Daniel tried to convince himself to delete what he'd found. But the more he read, the angrier he became. Branton Dynamics had been secretly collecting data from millions of Americans, emails, texts, even microphone recordings, all under a contract funded by taxpayers. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This was the kind of thing people whispered about online, but he had proof. So he did what he thought was right. He leaked it. Not for money, not for fame. He sent the files anonymously to a journalist he trusted. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Federal contractor accused of illegal surveillance. People were outraged. Politicians denied everything. Branton Dynamics claimed it was a misunderstanding. But behind the scenes, a massive federal investigation began. One aimed not at the company, but at the person who exposed them. 2 weeks later, at 3 a.m., Daniel woke up to the sound of glass shattering. Before he could even reach for his phone, his apartment door burst open. FBI! Get down! Flashlights blinded him. Heavy boots thundered through the hall. Hands grabbed him, slammed him face-first into the floor. Cold metal cuffs clicked around his wrists. Daniel Reeves, you're under arrest for violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. He didn't resist. He couldn't even speak. What did I do? He stammered. One of the agents leaned close. You hacked a federal system. That's espionage. Daniel's heart sank. He tried to explain that he wasn't a spy, that he was trying to expose wrongdoing, but no one listened. They tore through his apartment, taking every laptop, hard drive, and notebook he owned. By dawn, Daniel was sitting in a holding cell, still in his pajamas, surrounded by men accused of real crimes. Assault, robbery, drug trafficking. He kept replaying the moment he opened that file, wishing he'd never touched it. When the case hit the media, the narrative flipped instantly. Overnight, Daniel went from whistleblower to cybercriminal. Reporters called him the digital outlaw. Prosecutors said his leak compromised national security. Megan tried to visit him, but the guards turned her away. He's a federal inmate now, they said. Weeks turned into months. His court-appointed lawyer seemed overwhelmed. They're throwing the book at you, Daniel, he said during one visit. They're charging you with multiple counts under the Espionage Act, conspiracy, and unauthorized access. That's basically life. Daniel blinked in disbelief. For opening a file? For downloading it, the lawyer said grimly. They're saying you trafficked classified data. Daniel laughed bitterly. I didn't sell anything. I gave it to a reporter. That's the problem, his lawyer replied. They say you disseminated it. It's all about wording. And the wording in your case doesn't look good. Months later, the trial began. The courtroom was filled with cameras. The prosecution painted Daniel as a dangerous hacker who endangered the country. They showed pictures of servers, data graphs, code lines, most of which meant nothing to the jury. Every time Daniel tried to explain, he was shut down. His lawyer's objections were overruled. The prosecutor's voice boomed. This man accessed federal systems. He bypassed security, stole sensitive information, and spread it to the public. This isn't heroism. It's treason. The word treason hit Daniel like a knife. When the jury came back after only 4 hours of deliberation, he already knew what they'd say. Guilty on all counts. Daniel stared blankly ahead as his mother wept in the back row. He wanted to tell her it was going to be okay, but he couldn't even move. The day of sentencing was worse than he imagined. The courtroom was cold and full of cameras again. The prosecutor asked for the maximum penalty, to send a message to those who believe they can endanger national security from behind a keyboard. The judge agreed. And with that, Daniel Reeves, nonviolent, no prior record, no harm to anyone, was sentenced to 150 years. As the guards dragged him away, he caught sight of Megan standing in the hall. Tears streaked her face. She pressed her hand against the glass as he passed. I'll fix this, she mouthed. I'll make them see the truth. Daniel tried to smile, but it broke halfway. The doors slammed shut behind him. He was flown to ADX Florence, the same supermax prison that housed terrorists and serial killers. The guards called it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. He wasn't allowed to speak to other inmates. He spent 23 hours a day in a concrete cell with 1 hour for exercise alone in a cage. At night, he'd stare at the ceiling and whisper to himself, I didn't hurt anyone, but no one could hear him. One morning, months into his sentence, he received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with typed words. They know you didn't act alone. Daniel froze. His heart pounded. Who sent it? What did it mean? He looked toward the tiny window of his cell as a guard's shadow passed by. For the first time since his arrest, fear took over anger. Someone out there knew more than they were saying, and maybe, just maybe, Daniel wasn't the only one in danger. The letter trembled in Daniel's hands. They know you didn't act alone. Those 6 words looped through his mind like an echo that wouldn't fade. He sat still for a long time, the paper shaking slightly as the air vent above hissed. The note wasn't handwritten. It was typed, printed neatly on plain white paper. No envelope, no name, no return address. That was impossible. Every letter sent to inmates at ADX Florence went through heavy inspection. Guards opened, scanned, and photocopied every piece of mail. How had this one slipped through? He pressed the intercom button beside his bed. Officer? I just got. The speaker crackled to life. Lights out, Reeves. And then silence. Daniel stared at the paper again. Someone out there knew something. But who? And why send a message like that instead of proof? He hid the note under his mattress. That night he didn't sleep. Every sound, the clang of a cell door, the distant echo of boots on concrete, the hum of security lights, made his stomach twist tighter. He couldn't shake the thought that someone was watching him. The next morning, when the small slot in his cell door opened, a tray of breakfast slid through. Scrambled eggs, gray toast, and watery coffee. Daniel barely touched it. Then he heard the guard's voice. Reeves, lawyer visit. His heart leapt. Megan. He hadn't seen her in months. The guards shackled his wrists and ankles before escorting him down a long corridor lined with thick steel doors. The air smelled of bleach and metal. In the visiting room, they placed him behind a bulletproof glass divider. On the other side sat Megan Cole, her face tired, eyes red from lack of sleep. When she saw him, she tried to smile, but her voice broke. Daniel. He picked up the phone. Meg, how did you even get in here? I had to fight for clearance, she said. But listen, I've been digging into your case. Something's off. I mean, seriously off. Daniel leaned closer. What do you mean? The files you leaked, they weren't just embarrassing for Branton Dynamics. They were connected to a private intelligence network the company was funding off the books. Military-grade surveillance. Black budget stuff. Daniel's stomach twisted. So I was right. They were hiding something. Megan nodded. And it gets worse. Someone tampered with your trial evidence. The copy of the data they used against you, it was modified. They added files you never had access to. Daniel's eyes widened. You're saying they framed me? I'm saying, she whispered. They needed a scapegoat. Someone the public could hate. Someone they could bury. For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. The memory of the judge's gavel flashed in his mind, 150 years. He looked down at the phone cord trembling in his hand. Meg, I got a letter. She frowned. A letter. He hesitated. It said, they know you didn't act alone. Megan froze. Her expression changed, from confusion to worry. Who sent it? I don't know. No name. It just showed up. She swallowed hard. Then whoever sent it knows something about all this. Maybe someone inside the system. Before Daniel could respond, a guard stepped forward. Time's up. Megan pressed her hand against the glass. Don't lose hope. Okay? I'm not done yet. I'll find out who did this. Daniel mirrored her hand on his side of the glass. Be careful, Meg. The guard pulled him away before he could say more. Back in his cell, the world felt smaller. He sat on his bed staring at the crack in the wall. His mind spun through everything Megan said. Tampered evidence, hidden networks, black budgets. He needed answers. But how could he find them from inside a concrete box? Hours passed. The prison grew quieter. Then, as the lights dimmed, a faint thunk came from the slot in his door. Daniel turned. Another folded note had appeared. His pulse spiked. He grabbed it and unfolded it carefully. This one said, if you want the truth, don't trust your lawyer. Wait for the next shift. Daniel stared at the message, his heart pounding in his chest. Don't trust your lawyer? His lawyer was court-appointed. Sure, but he hadn't spoken to him in months. The handwriting this time was different. Handwritten in black ink, hurried but firm. He looked at the door slot, but no one was there. The corridor was silent. He didn't know whether to be terrified or hopeful. Someone out there wanted him to know the truth. But who could reach him inside the most secure prison in America? Later that night, as the guard shift changed, Daniel heard the faint squeak of boots. A shadow paused in front of his cell. Reeves, a low voice whispered. Daniel stood slowly. Who's there? Keep your voice down. The man stepped closer. A guard, but not one Daniel recognized. His face was partly hidden by the brim of his cap. I don't have long, the guard said. You didn't deserve this sentence. You were supposed to take a plea deal. Someone made sure you didn't. Daniel blinked. What are you talking about? The guard glanced over his shoulder, then slipped something through the slot. A tiny flash drive sealed in plastic. Hide it, he whispered. Don't open it here. They're watching. Who's watching? Daniel asked, his heart racing. But the guard didn't answer. He turned, walking quickly down the hall until he disappeared. Daniel stared at the small object in his hand, no larger than his thumb, labeled with one word. Cedar. His throat went dry. That name again. The Cedar Project. He tucked the flash drive deep inside his mattress just before another guard passed by, checking locks. Hours later, Daniel sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling. The fear was back, but so was something else. Something he hadn't felt since his arrest. Hope. Someone was trying to help him. Someone who knew what really happened. He didn't know if he could trust the guard, the notes, or anyone outside those walls. But one thing was clear, his case wasn't over. Somewhere beyond those concrete walls, a secret was still buried. And now he had a piece of it. 2 days later, things changed. The warden himself came to Daniel's cell. That never happened. "Reeves," he said, voice cold and controlled. "You're being transferred." Daniel frowned. "Transferred? Why?" "Orders from the top." "Where are you sending me?" The warden's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "Someplace quieter." Daniel felt a chill run through him. He glanced toward the bed where the flash drive was hidden under the mattress. Something told him this transfer wasn't routine. Something told him they were trying to make him disappear.